Okay, folks. So we're gonna do the last two scripts that really are important for this thing. And so I'm gonna talk about the day-night cycle, and I'm gonna talk about the data visualization. So in a lot of ways, the data visualization is the easiest one to understand. It's another one of these helper functions that I sort of made. And what it does is it's just gonna deal with the text and displaying the correct text onto the screen so I can get my averages. But it's also going to do something kind of neat, which is it's going to basically ask everything in the scene about its speed and vision and things like that. So this is where if you ever want to collect any more data about it, you can just add functions that ask the things that you want. So a couple of things here is that this is definitely one I could probably come up with a slightly better way to do this, but this is how I did it this time, which is I made a couple of functions, and this part I think is actually pretty good. This function I really like. This one's like find average speed, and it returns a float, so it's actually going to generate a number. So what does it do? Well, I used this great command called find game objects with tag. So before we've used find with tag, which just finds like one thing. We use that in the data visualization project. But in this case, I actually wanted to find all the critters in the scene. So in this case, I go and say, hey, I want to find all the critters. And when you do this, it makes a list. So if you guys don't know this, by just putting var here, it means that it will automatically pick the best variable type based on what you're assigning it. So in this case, like, see how when I hover it, it says game object. It means it like knows to, it sort of smartly decides that should be an array of game objects. So anyways, it's just kind of nice when you're like not sure what the function does. And you can be like, you know what, pick the right thing for me. So that's a pretty cool thing that C# does for us. So then I used the for each command, which is basically a quick way to go through all of the game objects in that list of critters. And then I just set up something to be the total speed. I go in and I grab the current speed of the navmesh agent. So I could go in, and I actually have two ways to do this, right? I could go grab it from the navmesh agent, or I could grab it from the critter stats. And so you'll notice, I did it this way with the vision. It's exactly the same, and I went in and I got the component critter control. I went into my stats and I grabbed the vision. So I could have went critter control dot my stats dot speed, but I wanted to show you just a different way of doing things. And so then this returns it critters.length tells you the length of that list. And so that gives me a nice, it gives me the mean. And so then I return that, and then I save it into a variable. And then I do our little thing where I change the text object, and I turn that into a string, and boom, there we go. And so now I can go in. This says fix it later because before it didn't actually find the vision. And I do that a lot. I leave myself little notes about things I want to update and change. Sometimes I get something working, but I'm like, that's ugly, or it doesn't quite do it the way that I want. And so I make a note to, when I get time, if I'm feeling comfortable, to go back and fix it. This is one that I fixed, but I forgot to leave the little reference. Okay, so I have these little functions there. But really the cool thing about this is going in and finding all of the critters with the tags. And so you can see you could do some neat stuff with playing with setting their tags to be interesting things when you create them, and that. Okay, so now we understand the data visualization thing. You might, and also I should just say we used included TextMesh Pro up here, and that made let us make these GUI things, which we then, when we look at our world control over here, you can see that they're linked right here. And so I just went into my canvas, I made two TextMesh Pro objects, and then I just dragged those into the slots. Okay, so now the the exciting thing happens to be with the day-night cycle. And so this was kind of like I wanted to have the generations work, and I needed some way to sort of have like the, I don't know, end of the day, end of the year, whatever you want to think about it as. So, and I needed something to sort of manage like the spawning of food and just like a lot of the nuts and bolts things, because the critters can't do everything. So, this thing knows about the prefabs for the food and the critters, and it has a copy of our script spawning stuff that we talked about last time. And we have something called day timer, which is just something that we're going to use to count the seconds in the day. When we start off our world, we're going to spawn some food and critters. That's going to be the first thing. The second thing we're going to do is this little chunk is going to keep track of like the whole day. And so you can see here that as I go through this update loop, I'm just going to be adding time to it slowly. So this is just going to add real time to it. And then I'm going to have some things happen based on, do I get that real time? So the first thing I'm going to check is, did I get to the day timer? Did it get over how many seconds in the day? Notice that I made that in my world data. So when I was testing this out, I had, 5 seconds in a day. So I could just get through a day really quick to make sure that all my end of the day stuff was working really well. But when I actually like let it run, like maybe I'm going to have like 20 seconds or more be my day. So a couple of things happen when I hit this threshold. One is this means this is like dawn when I get up to here. So I'm going to make sure that people know that it's not night anymore. I'm going to reset my timer. I'm going to respawn my food. And then I am going to call this function called life. Originally, I thought I might have this function called death that worked on killing everything. But then I actually made that part of the critter because it seemed to be like, you know what? You could die not just in the morning, but any time if you ever ran out of energy. So I just made that over there. So what does life do? Life has a really cool thing. It goes through, and remember, this is like the day just dawned. So that means everybody got home. And then now I'm going to check, like, did they get enough food to reproduce, right? And so if they got home, I then... or I'm going to call this thing, and I'm basically going to say, hey, for every critter that survived, okay, so in this case, anyone that's still left in the scene, I searched for all of them up here. I am going to go in and grab its stats. So I just did a little thing here, so I would have its stats in a variable so I could access them. And I said, hey, if the stats, okay, of the food that they ate is bigger than the food to reproduce, then I am going to call my spawn child function. Okay, which you remember is I send it in a parent and then it does a bunch of stuff. So I sent in the transform so that it says like, hey, you sent me my parent. And then it does all the rest for us. Then once I've looked at that thing, so that thing either spawns or doesn't, then I'm going to reset it to say, hey, I'm done eating food. I am going to reset my energy because I'm basically like, well, if you made it home, you get to, get some, like you hung out, you got, rested, but maybe, you burned off the extra energy you had too. So just sort of, that's another thing you could sort of change. And then I changed myself to being not at home anymore because I'm about to launch them off into the searching. So this is kind of my like beginning of the day cleanup. Okay. The second part of this is really important, is that I have like a little buffer. You'll notice that this also says day timer greater than a certain amount. So I wanted to have a little bit of a gap between when the world data, like when the end of the day happened and when the new day started. And that was really just to help me out. And so I might make this a lot larger thing, like maybe 0.9. So there's less of a gap between when they disappear and appear. But the idea here is that about 3/4 through the day, it comes to night. And it sets this to night. Okay. Then it goes through and it does what we've done before, which is find game objects with tag. It finds all the food and it just destroys all the food. Okay. Now I left myself a little bit of note that I said, well, maybe I tell every creature to go home here. And so this could be one where I go into every creature and call. Remember, we had made our own little function called go home. And so what I could do in this case is I could grab every creature and tell every creature to go home. And that would sort of like be like, you didn't find enough food, but it's nighttime, you better walk home. And that would probably be a nice adjustment there, but I didn't finish putting that in for this one. So again, I left myself a little note saying, hey, maybe that would be something to do in the future and seem a little bit more realistic. Cool. So that's all this really does. It just manages that little bit of end of the day and end of the night thing. And again, there's a couple of things that sort of check for now that night is true. You can then do things during the night. So if there's other stuff you want to have happen only at night, like for me, my data visualization, this runs a few times at night. This is one that I feel is like, this is a little bit clunky, right? Because it would be nice if I just ran one time. I'm like, maybe I should have put this instead of giving it a fixed update here. Maybe I should have made it in a different way. But I was like, you know what? Not the cleanest thing, but it really worked and let me solve the problem. So this is one that I might leave myself a little note and say, you know what? I want to make this cooler later on, but it doesn't hurt my program to have it done here. And this is the way that I figured it out the first time. So that's totally okay. You don't have to do it perfect every time. And so that's part of the reason that I tried to leave some of these kind of things in here. We just, hey, first time we try to get something, it works. And then we, the more we think about it, the more we think about updating it. But hey, sometimes you run out of time and you know what? Leave it a little bit weird the first time. And if you get time later, go back and fix it. So hopefully that was helpful. That covers pretty much the entire simulation from start to finish. Hopefully this will give you some inspiration about kinds of things you can do to make this happen.